maybe a difficult matchup here for White-Blue Heroic.
Well, it depends on the specifics of the list, but the more cheap removal, the better, particularly Drown in Sorrow and Bile-Blight.
Perhaps an Aether Spouse is going to make things a little bit difficult. There is a one-of here in Dykman's deck list. So Mann starts things off with a Temple of Enlightenment. Dykman will start off with a Temple of Mystery. We're underway here in round number 5 of 15 of our Standard Open. 9 today, 6 tomorrow. As Mann will draw a card, we'll see if his creature to play in the second turn of the game. Does look like he has a copy of Battlewise Hoplite, so he'll play an island. And he will just pass the turn back, so perhaps no creature here for Mann.
Well, it does look like he has a Hoplite, but he also has a God's Willing, so it looks like he's willing to concede casting the creature this turn to be able to play next turn with some protection.
Now, there is a bit of a trade-off here, because he is now playing against 2 blue mana, so something like a Nullify could work its way into the equation, but Mann being very, very patient here in the early stages of the game, he'll tap the 2 mana, and now here's Battlewise Hoplite, and we'll see if this will resolve. Wormlings for sure. Doesn't look like he's playing against a blue-black control deck right now.
No, so far concealed. And Steven with a little bit of mana difficulty here as Drown Sorrow in hand, but without the ability to cast it right now.
And there is Polluted Delta. See how Dykman wants to move forward on this turn, because you have to imagine he's well aware of what he's up against now. If he didn't know Steven Mann and his propensity to play heroic strategies given his performance in the Players' Championship, well, now he certainly knows, since there's a Battlewise Hoplite out there.
The cat is big time out of the bag, and I don't think Dykman's hand can really provide any resistance this turn, but he at least needs to make a show of it.
Mann considering cycling Defiant Strike here on Dykman's end step. We all know that Steven Mann is very methodical in his ways, but he's just going to untap and draw a card for the turn.
And trying to figure out what the removal spell is he has to worry about there. The mana that Dykman has access to represents Soultide Charm, which the Hoplite is safe from, but still probably best not to risk it. You can cash in the Defiant Strike somewhere down the line where things are a little bit safer.
And Battlewise Hoplite looking to go on the offensive here. Though we'll see if it's going to wear an aura or not before sending into the red zone. A lot to think about when you're playing against 3 open mana. You see a Temple of Mystery, an Island, and a Polluted Delta. It could be multiple different decks in this format, some version of Sultai. Probably doesn't have one on blue-black control just yet, however, as here comes the Hoplite.
And Steven Mann kind of wants to wait for a little more information before he goes all gangbusters on deploying all of his enchantments in one turn. Right now, he's probably a little uncertain what he's playing against, and once Dykman makes some sort of play, he'll have a little more information to work with and then start enchanting his creatures accordingly.
The Temple of Enlightenment, Scryly's top card on top. There's a favorite Hoplite. It looks like Dykman will have a response. He'll start by sacrificing a Polluted Delta here, so you have to imagine a swamp is what he's going to go grab.
Definitely needs to start
a dissolve or something.
Definitely needs to start unlocking some of the double black spells in his hand.
There is a swamp. See some of his cards turned around a little bit here, so he's going to sort that out, shuffle up his deck, and present it over to Mann. But double black spell is certainly an issue at this point. And he does have one Urborg to draw to help fix his mana a little bit here. And there is a dissolve. That's going to take care of the favorite Hoplite. So a little scry action here. Top card very quickly stays on top.
Have to imagine that's a black source of mana.
Let's see what the draw is, and it is a swamp, so that's exactly what the doctor ordered here if you're Dykman. Two cards in the graveyard if you're keeping track of cards like Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise. And you can see there's a Dig Through Time in Dykman's hand. He's going to tap 3 mana right now, and he's going to go for a Drown in Sorrow. And this is where holding the Defiant Strike may have been a good idea.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, he gets to eat up Dykman's entire turn here, keep his creature alive, draw a card, scry. A lot of good stuff going on.
Now, Defiant Strike, of course, he has +1/+0. That's not all that helpful in the arms race with Drown in Sorrow and Toughness, but Heroic will give it +1/+1. And that counter will stay on there. So he'll be able to effectively counter the Drown in Sorrow and get the draw card.
And this sets the stage for now an Ordeal of Thassa next turn, just firing off right away. So you can see Steven Mann getting really paid off for the discipline he showed early on in the game, not just deploying his Battlewise Hoplite into open mana, not just enchanting his creature into open mana, waiting for Dykman to pull the trigger, and now he's paid off with a really nice turn.
Very quickly tapping 2 mana to cast Ordeal of Thassa, trigger Heroic, little scry action here. Battlewise Hoplite is now a 4/4, but it is that patience that is key. When we watch players play this deck, some players are a little too aggressive with their Heroic strategy, but there are times where you're supposed to be aggressive, and there's times for patience, and knowing when to dial it up or when to pull it back really separates people.
It's a huge part of playing this deck because if you screw up, you have a bunch of creature enchantments and 1/1s for 1 left over in your deck. So you don't have a lot of margin for error, even though it seems just like a straightforward beatdown deck. Because you're walking that tightrope of applying enough pressure while leaving yourself with resources back, if you mess up, you often just lose the game.
Tough enlightenment, little scry action here. Top card is going to become the bottom one now. Man is going to pass the turn back with 2 mana available. Dykman will draw a card. It's a copy of Ashiok. Not going to have much of an effect on this particular board state. Here is 4 mana. And there is a Perilous Vault. So oddly enough, this might put Man to the test to see, okay, can you kill me this turn? Can you actually deal me 12 while you're attacking for at least 5? Is there some way for you to get to 7?
But Dykman without the 5th land here, and also will be in a position where he has to just blow up the Perilous Vault next turn. So Steven Man can put him in a position where he hits him for a bunch, forces Dykman to blow up the Perilous Vault inside of combat on Man's next turn, and then Man can follow up with more creatures.
And there's an attack for 5. Man going to play a Flooded Strand and just pass the turn back, not willing to extend any further into the Perilous Vault in case a land does come off the top of the deck, which it does not. It's a copy of Divination.
I love that play from Steven Man. I mean, he's just saying, you know, you had to draw a 5th land here, and I can leave myself with the maximum resources left over, even if you do that. And if you fail, Steven Man can probably enchant his creature to a sufficient place with God's Willing backup to go for the kill this coming turn.
Dykman definitely in a difficult spot here. Just doesn't have the mana to really function at this point. Looks like he is reaching to cast something. So a card like Bioblight is no good at this point. Casting Divination certainly isn't the sexiest play, but it's a play he's got to make. So that's going to resolve 2 cards coming here. Despise and Polluted Delta look like the draws. And Despise, while it may not be a game winner, picking up information on the way out of the game might be helpful.
Yep. I mean, I would at least cast it.
There is the Delta. And he'll just pass the turn back over to Man, Will Dykman. Man will draw. And he's very quickly reaching for spells. This is an ordeal of Heliod. That'll trigger Heroic no matter what. Dykman's going to have a response. He'll sacrifice Polluted Delta, going down to 6 in the process. You have to imagine a Swamp is coming here for in just a moment. Excuse me. Perhaps it's time for a Bioblight to slow down that Battle-Wise Hoplite.
But if he taps out, I think Steven Man's got enough protection left over in his hand to end the game this turn.
This entire game has been played on Steven Man's terms.
Yes.
That's exactly how he wants it to be. Now there's God's Willing. And Dykman already knows it's over, so he's picking up his permanence. A beautifully played game there by Steven Man. He is up 1 with white-blue Heroic over blue-black control.
What's also really nice about the play pattern that Steven Man executed that game is it left Dykman with nothing to do with his mana on a lot of turns, you know? Steven Man can get something into play, leave up all of his mana. If Dykman's not willing to play into his open mana, then he's just passing his turn as well. When Dykman commits mana, then Steven Man can respond in kind.
Time to take a look at the sideboards here. We will start with Steven Dykman, who does have a copy of Pharika's Cure, 3 Negates, 3 Disdainful Strokes, an Aether Spouts, a Silence of Believers, 3 Thoughtseize, a Grind Clock, and then 2 copies of Drown in Sorrow. I mean, a lot of healthy options here. Of course, you're looking for creature removal, but Aether Spouts, I think, is probably the big one, is that's the card that a lot of people just don't play around in this format.
They don't play around it. It's something that completely ignores protection effects. And even if Steven Man's able to build up a board of multiple large creatures, Aether Spouts can clean it all up. So that's definitely going to come in. I think the Thoughtseizes and the Negates are also good additions here, as well as the Drown in Sorrows. Drown in Sorrow can be a little dubious sometimes because the Heroic deck is able to grow its creatures outside of Drown in Sorrow range, but at least on the play, it's likely to be good for Dykman.
We'll take a look at Man's sideboard and what he's got for his Heroic deck.
2 copies of Treasure Cruise, 2 Heliod's Pilgrims, an Ordeal of Heliod, Mortal's Ardor, Mortal Obstinacy, an Erase, 2 Stubborn Denials, 3 Glare of Heresies, a Burmaz, King of Rescos, and a Ajani's Presence. I really like bringing in the Ajani's Presence, pretty good against Hero's Downfall, some other removal you can anticipate here. 2 Treasure Cruises for a long game, and the 2 copies of Heliod's Pilgrim, the 2 Stubborn Denials. Well, cards that are good against spells, and cards that are helpful in games that go long.
Not sure if this is a good matchup or a bad matchup for Heroic. It seems like a close one. Just, you know, if he can, I mean, of course, if he can play the games like he played the last one, then he's probably going to win, but just to be able to keep blue-black kind of off kilter a little bit. Don't let them get their feet set.
I think the blue-black deck, you know, its best cards in the matchup are awesome, and the worst cards that it has are close to uncastable. So that's the tough part. Dykman there was a little bit slow, didn't have a lot of removal, didn't have a lot of early responses, definitely drew the bad half of his deck for the matchup, and that's the kind of game where White-Blue Heroic has a huge edge.
Well, these players will finish sideboarding up, but while we do wait, we will talk about Cardboard Crack, the fantastic comic involving Magic. You can follow them on Twitter, or you can buy their books, available at Star City Games right now.
Yeah, $12.99 a piece, 3 different paperback books available, the whimsical black and white Magic-themed comic strip. StarCityGames.com/cardboardcrack. Order your copies today.
The first run of these went out really, really quickly, actually. So if you're looking to pick them up, definitely head over right away because pretty popular comic, and the books have been popular too.
Often what happens in the, you know, when you're kind of publishing things for the first time, you have a low print run, sort of test the waters, dip your toe in the water, see what the response is. Response to Cardboard Crack has been excellent so far. Sold out very quickly.
Not much of a surprise.
Yep.
Fantastic comic. You find it in the Star City Games newsletter as well. Again, StarCityGames.com/cardboardcrack for more information about that. As game number 2 will be underway here in just a moment between Steven Dykman and Stephen Mann. Mann, again, a player we saw at our Players' Championship, barely making it in. Had to have Dylan Donegan win that Season 4 Invitational in Charlotte, in Seattle, as we know Dylan was able to do. Mann able to make it to day 2 of competition at the Players' Championship. Did make a lot of noise, but you know he's a quiet guy, so you're not gonna get a lot of emotion or a lot of noise out of him.
But you could tell both with the sweat that he had to have at the Invitational in Seattle and the stress of playing in the Players' Championship, he was definitely more expressive at those events, if not necessarily on camera, then definitely off camera, than we typically see him.
And again, to see a player like him in attendance this particular weekend, pretty telling. You know, number 15 on our Season 1 leaderboard right now. Looking to get some Open Series points, perhaps make his way towards qualifying for the Players' Championship yet again. Remember, at-large bid available at the conclusion of Season 1. We saw players like Brian Braun-Duin and Chris Van Meter win slots to the Players' Championship that way. So we'll see if Mann's able to do it here during Season 1. Off to a great start, not only in this game with a favorite hoplite, but off to a great start this season so far, number 15 on our Open Series leaderboard. This will be a Thoughtseize. Heliod's Pilgrim, Defiant Strike, a Hero of Iroas. An Ordeal of Thassin looks to be a Treasure Cruise along with the Plains there. So not a bad hand there for Mann, though he does need a little help as far as mana is concerned.
Which is typical of White-Blue Heroic. The deck needs to cast blue spells and white spells very early on in the game. The mana is a little troubled, but there's some redundancy in the threats. There's a cantrip. I think this is a totally fine keep.
Dykman's going to write down those cards and select one of them, of course. Easy to say take Ordeal of Thassin. Might be the most powerful card in Mann's hand at this point, though he can't cast it, so perhaps it's a little more difficult than I'm giving it credit for.
I think there's arguments for, you know, Defiant Strike and Hero of Iroas, depending on the nature of Dykman's hand.
Looks like he will select the Aura, though. That's one more card in the graveyard for Treasure Cruise. Got to keep that in mind, too. Might seem as though we're a far away from that, but probably closer than you think, because now here's a Temple of Deceit. Take a look at the top card. And that'll become the bottom card.
Dykman's probably going to kill some of Stephen Mann's stuff, so you get there faster than you might think.
Probably right about that. Looks like Mann drew Plains for the turn. The tough part here is how far does he want to extend? Well, he's going to start by casting Defiant Strike. Trigger, draw a card.
And the reason that Stephen Mann is doing this is if he just plays a land and a Hero of Iroas, if Dykman has Drown in Sorrow, that's the end of the game. So even though it looks like he's kind of taking this weird, slower route, he has to out of the respect for Dykman sweepers.
We'll see what Dykman can put together in his third turn of the game. Of course, knows the contents of Mann's hand for the most part, thanks to that Thoughtseize. He does have a copy of Aether Spouts in hand, so you have to imagine he wants to work his way towards that. But he also has some other removal there in Bile Blight. He'll just pass the turn back for now, though. Mann draws a copy of Hero of Iroas, so no blue mana just yet here for Stephen Mann.
The issue here is, you know, if Dykman leans too hard on Aether Spouts, is he has to respect the possibility of Stubborn Denial in Stephen Mann's deck post-board. Occasionally you even see a copy or two of Negate hanging out in these decks. So even though Aether Spouts is, you know, the ace for Dykman in this matchup, he can't lean on it exclusively because Stephen Mann does have the possibility to interact with it.
Well, there is the blue mana, and now here is the hero. And this perhaps will be a dissolve, and it is. So that'll take care of the hero. Favorite Hoplite still out there on the battlefield. Dykman very quickly keeping the card on top. An attack here for 2 is going to bring Dykman down to 13. And now Mann's got some things going. Treasure Cruise in hand that he's working his way towards as Dykman very quickly puts the land on top of his deck into play. Looks as though it was a polluted Delta. Just going to pass the turn back.
And I think he put the land into play too quickly there. It's representing that he probably has a handful of spells because he so quickly kept the card on top and then put the land into play.
Perhaps giving away a little bit of information there.
All these little subtle clues, they don't matter very much at the 0-1 table, but once you're 4-0, your opponents are going to pick up on this kind of stuff.
Here's an attack for 2. Dykman's going to go down to 11. Is it time for a Heliod's Pilgrim? It is. We'll see if this resolves. Bile Blights will take care of favorite Hoplite now that the coast is clear. And now Heliod's Pilgrim will resolve. So Stephen Mann's going to go searching for an aura. He'll reveal it and put it into the grip here momentarily.
This is a challenge that faces these control decks nowadays, post-Ravnica rotation, is that Dykman can't just sit on his hands here and wait for Revelation to show up and end the game. He's got to handle every threat as it comes, and there's no easy way to lock or overpower Stephen Mann out of the game. So each threat that comes to the table is another issue. And if Dykman has to trade 1 for 1 the whole time, until he finds something like Dig Through Time or Pearl Lake Ancient or some high-impact play, Stephen Mann can hang with this control deck even as we get into the later turns.
Stratus Walk is what was found. We're going to head back to Dykman. Looked like an Urborg was the draw. So plenty of black mana available now here for Stephen. So much so that we could see Polluted Delta search for an island now instead of maybe a swamp that I wanted to find.
Now, Dykman with Jace's Ingenuity in hand, I think there's an argument for just casting this right now, because if this gets hit with a Stubborn Denial, Dykman's hand's not great. I mean, it's a removal spell in Nithra Spouts that looks good, but Mann's already shown the capacity to be able to play through these 1-for-1 removal spells.
He's tapping 5 mana right now, so perhaps Stephen Dykman agrees with you, and he does. He will main phase Jace's Ingenuity, putting the shields down, yes, but making sure that it does not get countered. So, Perilous Vault, Silence the Believers, and a Temple of Deceit of the draws, and Stephen Dykman will pass the turn back. I think a smart play there.
I think so too. It does open up, you know, Stephen Mann could have some outrageous turn of putting a bunch of enchantments on something, but with just Heliod's Pilgrim in play, that's unlikely. And I think that Dykman correctly identified it in the event that I get hit here with a Stubborn Denial on my Jace's Ingenuity, the leftovers of my hand are just not that good.
Stratus Walk. Gonna pump up the jam there on Hero of Iroas. And Stubborn Denial was the draw off of the cantrip from the Stratus Walk. Now, doesn't look like Mann has a land to play, so he'll just have to pass the turn back, but not a bad turn for both players.
I'm sure Stephen Mann was happy to get the shields down there for a moment, and Dykman was thrilled to get that Jace's Ingenuity to resolve.
And there's a Temple to start things off here for Dykman. Take a look at the top card.
And this is an issue for Dykman right now is, even though his hand's quite powerful, I mean, look at it, it's all removal spells, Perilous Vaults, Aether Spouts, it looks like a good hand. He can't play 2 spells in 1 turn, which means that if Mann has counter spells in his hand, if he has God's Willing type effects, Dykman can't play that efficiently. He has to be tapping out on his own turn, and that gives an opportunity for Mann to resolve some of his enchantments.
Looks like we might see an Urborg-powered Silence the Believers here.
Well, I think Dykman's considering Perilous Vault right now, and it is potent in that it sweeps up the board. If it resolves, there's nothing Mann can really do about it the next turn. But Stephen Mann can also kill him from here.
Yeah. I like casting Silence in this situation. You know, there is, of course, the play of play Perilous Vault, hope you don't kill me untap, you know, kind of dictate the pace of the game, but it is risky.
Yes, definitely. And I think Dykman's hand's probably powerful enough, and Mann's not really putting that much pressure on him that he can afford to be a little bit on the slower side.
On Johnny's Presence, the draw there for Stephen Mann. But he's a little bottlenecked on mana at this point. Only 1 blue, 2 white, 3 total. Doesn't allow him to do a ton. Hero of Iroas was pretty important there because it was actually reducing the cost of spells.
And now Mann's in a position where he has to take some risks and just go for this. But because Dykman's hand is so unwieldy, this play works out just fine for Stephen Mann. Dykman's unlikely to punish him. Most likely he plays 1 spell this turn, which Stephen Mann can answer with a Johnny's Presence. or with his God's Willing as appropriate.
Hero's Downfall, not a terrible draw. It's a cheaper removal spell. But you saw when Mann did play the Ordeal of Thoughts, he was not enthused with his play.
Well, he knows it's a risk, and he's trying his best not to take risks like that. But he's bottlenecked on mana. He just needs to do something here. He can't attack for one a turn with this Heliod's Pilgrim. So he's taking a risk, but I think it's a worse play to just sit on your heels there with the hand the way that Mann's is.
Well, Dykman trying to figure out how he works his way out of this situation. He's at 8. He's got a lot of spells in his hand. But you don't get to take them with you, as you like to say.
Exactly. And this is the problem now with Dykman's hand being so clunky. If he could play 2 spells this turn, he could probably get the Heliod's Pilgrim off the table, and then things become very easy. If he can't do that, then it gets problematic.
You see him tapping 4 right now. So it's going to be a clunker. It's a Perilous Vault. Powerful card in the matchup, don't get me wrong. But it is a rather clunky one, and there is definitely some assembly required with that.
But that's the play that Dykman has to make there. He has enough respect for the God's Willing, Ajani's Presence type of cards. He knows he likely loses if he goes for it, and Steven Mann has it there, that he kind of has to do this, hope the man doesn't kill him, and then have a safe way to remove the Heliod's Pilgrim the following turn.
And it's a Stratus Walk. Draw a card. Hero of Iroas. Not the sexiest draw. Yeah, shrug the shoulders, get in for 3 now. But the big problem here is Ordeal is not really going to get the opportunity to crack, you have to imagine.
Probably not. Although, at least in that scenario, the worst thing for Mann here is if he attacks, Dykman says, I take the hit. Mann can't follow up post-combat because the Perilous Vault's in play. Dykman untaps and Perilous Vaults, or Perilous Vaults and untaps, and then you're behind on the board. Because the Ordeal is likely to trigger, Dykman will probably do this now, and it means that Mann has an opportunity to add something to his board post-combat, which is important.
Well, there's your Vault. I'll take care of all 3 of those cards. They are exiled now.
And the exiling is pretty relevant here. We've seen it with Silence the Believers. We've seen it with now a Perilous Vault, because we know that Steven Mann still has the Treasure Cruise in his hand. So this exiling looks innocuous, but it's actually really important, because otherwise Mann could probably fire off a Treasure Cruise for 1 mana by this point.
A little scry action here from Temple of Enlightenment. Mann looks like he's going to leave the card on top. Play a copy of Hero of Iroas and start to rebuild his board. He'll pass the turn back over to Dykman. Dykman will untap those 5 lands. He's got 7 total in play. Take a draw step. Right now, all he's looking for are lands, and he should draw another one there in Swamp. He just wants to get into 2-spell per turn territory.
Though, all of his spells right now are kind of these 1-for-1 trades. He's at a low life total. So the lands are good, but he also needs something like Day Through Time. He needs a cheap source of card advantage to restock his hand and get some forward progress here.
He's going to reach for some mana right now. And how about a Hero's Downfall? Going to go after that. Man wants to know, how many cards do you have left over there? How will I respond? Does have some options available there.
Mann knows that if Dykman's doing this, because he has the ability to play over the top right now.
Well, there's Ajani's Presence. That'll be in response to the Hero's Downfall to try to win this war. But Dykman will show you Silence the Believers, so that'll take care of the hero. It'll exile it, of course. And that'll be Steven Dykman's turn. Now, the question is, what kind of follow-up does Mann have now? We know he's got a Treasure Cruise in his hand.
But his hand's so stocked with action that I wouldn't be surprised if he just keeps developing his board, and then when he has actually nothing to do, then he will go ahead and Treasure Cruise.
The draw wasn't a bad one either. It's a copy of Battlewise Hoplite, another creature for him. So, not a bad spot to be in. He just wants to continue to present threats.
Exactly. The minute that he allows Dykman to untap with and Mann has no board is where the game gets pretty bad for Steven Mann.
Oh, looks like Mann's going to go for a cruise. Perhaps thinking he can take the opportunity to cruise here. Draw a couple of cards. If he draws a land, he can deploy the Battlewise Hoplite. Shields are down, yes, but he might be okay with that.
Well, he would have to miss on either a land or a 1-mana creature for that play to be really punishing. So there is a risk there on Steven Mann's side, but he would have to draw unreasonably poorly for him to get really punished by it.
Seeker of the Way is the play. And Mann able to present a threat yet again. Dykman's hand still a little clunky. He'll just have to pass the turn back over to Mann. Mann will draw a copy of Stubborn Denial. 2 of those in hand now. And perhaps the grand plan of Aether Spouts may go up in smoke here.
And there's a lot of spells that are going to be occurring here.
And it looks like there are 3 Stubborn Denials in hand, along with a God's Willing, a Battle-Wise Hot Play, another copy of Treasure Cruise. So a very interesting hand here for Mann, but a pretty good one.
These are going to amount to hard counters here, because he can easily get the Seeker of the Way up to 4 power plus.
Into the red zone we go. Dykman says, I will take 2. The follow-up here is Battle-Wise. Dykman will draw Polluted Delta. See how much that helps him.
Asking for cards in hand, still a ton in Steven Mann's hand.
Thank you very much, Treasure Cruise. 9 mana total, enough to play and pop the vault, but I think Steven Mann may have other ideas. That'll get countered right away. Did he have Ferocious? No, he didn't, but it's good enough.
I think Dykman's plan here is to now cast Aether Spouts, but Steven Mann has it covered with the other Stubborn Denial in hand.
There's Mana Confluence. Shrugging their shoulders in an attack. There is Aether Spouts, and as powerful as that card can be, Stubborn Denial is more powerful in this situation. Steven Mann's going to get the job done here over Steven Dykman, 2-0. White-Blue Heroic will take care of Blue-Black Control, and for number 15 on our Season 1 leaderboard, great start, 5-0.
Beautiful start and a really well-played match. On the surface of that matchup, there's a lot of places for the White-Blue Heroic deck to get tripped up against removal spells, sweepers, counter spells, even a couple of Aether Spouts in Dykman's main deck and sideboard. A lot of places for S-Man to get tripped up, but he was very good at measuring his threats, made sure he never overextended into any particular card, protected his threats, landed his enchantments when he could. It was just a very well-executed set of games there. And now Steven Mann 5-0.
You know, we saw him at the Season 4 Invitational not have a great tournament there, but at the Open at the Season 4 Invitational, made top 8.
Yeah.
Now he's back here looking to make another top 8, and it is very telling that, one, he flew up here from Florida simply because, one, he wants to qualify for the Players' Championship again. We know that. He's on the hunt for Open Series points, but 2,